Welcome to the Social Impact Level Up podcast. This is where we blur the lines between business, nonprofit, and impact. In season 3, we're redefining success for social entrepreneurs looking to grow their revenue. If you have reality-changing ideas, this is the place for you. Let's jump right into today's episode. What does it take to help elite women? Well, it takes knowing other elite women. And here today, I have somebody who you might think, Wendy has developed an alter ego somehow. Her name is also Wendy. So this is one of my longtime friends. I always am surrounded by other Wendys. I've known this Wendy probably about 20 years now, since we were both graduate students at Columbia. She has a great story to tell about being a social worker, being a mom, and helping elite women discover themselves through meditation and other modalities. Wendy, I'm going to turn it over to you and ask you, who are you and how do you make an impact?
I'm so excited to be here. I'm honored to be with Wendy. So I've known her a very long time. And who am I? I'm just a woman who wants to change reality for other women. I want to help women who have been in my footsteps. So girls who grew up who didn't have someone to be there for them, someone to provide guidance for them. And that's where Elite Like You came from.
I love that. And yes, it's always great to be a role model for the people who come after you. I think that's a big part of how you make an impact as an individual and how you kind of dedicate yourself to making sure that things are, better than you found them, essentially. And I know for both of us, we're Latinas. And I know I was the first generation Latina to go to college and then went all the way to Columbia. Can you just backtrack all the way to where it started in your career? How did you start? How did you know you wanted to make an impact and how did you make that choice so early on?
Well, it kind of fell in my lap. I didn't know that I wanted to make an impact. I just knew that the only way out of my family situation was education. So my sole focus and everything that I did was to get an education and get out of our family situation to make it better for future generations. And around me, I didn't see any growth. I didn't see any potential. So I was the one that I had to have that vision to create that. So it was very difficult. I felt alone many times because I had no one to talk to, no one to tell me what to do, where to go, how to reach that vision that I had, but somehow I made it.
I think that was one of the early things that brought us together is because we both kind of had that same story of coming from underprivileged sort of areas or places that you maybe weren't expected to go as far as we did. And then we show up at an Ivy League institution and find there were even fewer of brown faces around us. And so we all kind of glued ourselves together and said, hey, how do we get better? How do we elevate? How do we show up? Because it was one of the first times that we did see other people who look like us, who were in an elite space, who had come from that background of being maybe disadvantaged or under-resourced communities, had to work hard to get to where we were, had to be over straight A students to get to where we were. And then we show up and there's there's so few of us. We're like, oh my God.
Literally, there were so few of us. See, I grew up in a time, you tell me, Wendy, if you grew up with this also with government cheese, right? To subsidize your food. And the struggle was real to go through that and get to a place like Columbia University. You look around and you think, and this was for me, do I belong here? Did somebody make a mistake and I landed here? Did my acceptance fall off some kind of truck?
Well, no, that was still the time of affirmative action. So we did land there for a reason.
Yeah, but my grades were straight A's. So part of me was in disbelief, but part of me was in the thought process of, hey, I belong here, I worked hard. So it was finding that balance and fighting your own thoughts and beliefs of where you should be as a Latina female.
Yeah, I still do think that they were giving us a little bit of credit in that they had a ratio they were looking for of people. I do believe that because I feel like even though we were at the highest levels of our grades and other things, and we deserve to be there. I know that the competition to be in that school at that time was very tough. It was, I think, the top 3 social work schools in the country. So when you talk about this idea of being elite and an elite brown woman and coming from a background where, having to be elite to overcome barriers that existed by society or things that you didn't determine, they were given to you. You talked about government cheese and all those kind of little buzzwords that make us think, hey, there might have been a background here. You said you had a vision as a little girl and you were in a place that you needed to kind of transcend or grow up and become this vision. So, what was that like for you to kind of go through that process of growing into yourself and who you are as an elite woman?
Well, I give credit to my mom because my mom, when I was young, she would give me her high heel 80s pink pumps, and she had a briefcase. Even though she didn't work anywhere outside the home, she had this briefcase and she would tell me, "You're going to be a professional. You are going to make your own money. A man is not going to dictate how you live, what you do, and what your value is." And that's because of her history. So we would trek around the house with our heels and walking around. And even though at the time it felt very like we're playing dress up, in my mind, I knew that this was something that I needed to do and someone I needed to be in order to be the vision that she wanted for me. So it started there. It started at like 7 or 8 years old, playing dress up, and it ballooned from there.
If you're looking for funding and don't know where to start, let me introduce you to the secrets even grant writers don't know. Idea to Impact, the grant writing course that makes it easy to learn everything about grant writing from A to Z in plain English with on-demand half-hour modules and go-at-your-own-pace workbooks. This course is unlike any other because it delivers insider tips from a grant creator and grant reviewer, me. I've awarded over $35 million throughout my career, and I give you all of the resources and knowledge that you need to apply for millions of dollars on your own. No grant writer needed. Sign up today at wendyvelos.com/grants. I can totally agree with that because my mom is one of my biggest heroes as well. And I think growing up in a single family household, that was really important. Like seeing my mom go to work, the work ethic that she had to be able to bring home the money we needed to survive. Like it was just something that I learned from a really early age. And then I worked my way through college. I know you were out there working your way through grad school. We were doing a lot of things at the same time and still having fun at the same time too. But I want to know from your perspective of choosing social work, going down the clinical path, going through those next parts of your career after having that experience of seeing your mom's vision for you and sort of living into it. Where did you go from there to ultimately end up here where you have a blog and you're inspiring other women? Like just unveil more about you because I know you have a beautiful story, but I want people to kind of understand how you got to inspire other women.
So going back a little bit, I had a family member who had mental health issues. So growing up, I constantly saw the struggle of someone being in and out of hospitals, someone being medicated, not being in the right state of mind. So growing up, I was like, I want to help people like this. So I went through a lot seeing that and growing up and seeing someone that wasn't who I expected them to be. And slowly that migrated into me ending up in Columbia School of Social Work. And then before the pandemic hit, I was very much into meditation and actually finding the strength within you to create the vision of yourself. And then once I had time during the pandemic to really delve into the meditative process and use it myself to like stay sane with everything that was happening, then I decided to take the leap and start providing meditations for women or anyone who needs it.
It's so cool because I think so many people sort of discovered themselves during the pandemic and that sense of being alone and isolated when we're very social creatures, but yet we weren't able to socialize in the normal ways that we were used to. You kind of had to get something going. If you had nothing going, you needed something for your mental health. And I think that's where people started understanding the perspective of preventative mental health or the well-being practices being maintenance and self-care that has to be part of your routine. And I know that for me, that was really important. It was meditation, connecting on Zoom with other people and going through like meditative processes or breathing techniques, different things that I would learn, distance Reiki, like all kinds of those modalities were really helpful. Did you find that too?
I did. But I mean, again, everything, when you're a Latina female, speaking for myself, and Wendy, you can tell me if you went through this, everything's a process because mental health growing up, there was a stigma attached to that. seeing a social worker was a horrible thing. Seeing a therapist was a horrible thing. So going through that process of finding yourself and knowing that there's nothing wrong with needing help and needing support, and then moving through the pandemic, and then moving through finding yourself and meditation and finding your voice and finding your purpose. I think we all went through that. We all had that awakening, right? Like, I don't want to go into work. This is too much. I want to try this. I want to do that. So that's something I feel like we all metamorphosized into, right?
Yeah, and you had that awakening of the spiritual kind of wellness awakening. And then you have this awakening of like entrepreneurship at the same time that comes through with you deciding to put yourself out there and teaching people these techniques and going through meditation with people. And now you were just telling me about this exciting new adventure you have where you're starting to do this in Spanish, which I always wish I was fluent. And one of the things I absolutely appreciate about you and some of our fellow Latinos in Colombia was like, you guys would always get me with the Spanish and make me practice and like have me be like out in New York speaking Spanish. It's probably one of the times in my life I was the most fluent in Spanish. So I appreciate you for that. I also just love that you're bringing this practice to our fellow Latinos who maybe wouldn't have access if they didn't have someone like you.
Yeah. So I started with elitelikeyou.com, and basically just a place for other elite women to meet and for these meditations to have a home. So I started there, and then I started working with Unify TV, and through them, I'm providing exclusive meditations on various different topics, including finding your inner strength, protecting your energy. And finally, this past week, I introduced a Spanish language meditation because they have many different listeners from all over the world who could benefit from these meditations, specifically in their mother language. So I was so excited to do that.
I think that's great because, like you said before, Latinos are often either told to ignore or you say, ah, estás loca. Like, they're just crazy. Like, there's nothing really affirmative or uplifting about mental health in Latino culture. It's just sort of a battle. And I think, like you said, even being a social worker and having that stigma of what is a social worker and that they're not here for you to be helpful for you. And so, who are you going to get factual mental health information? There's a whole unpacking there. So I'm curious to hear about what your thoughts are around Latino mental health and maybe how can we better it or how can we give more people access?
Because of what I grew up seeing, my belief was you see a therapist, they're going to medicate you, you're going to turn into a zombie. And that was the fear because that's what I had seen. So I had to meet with different social workers and understand that meeting with a therapist could be talk therapy. It could just be you working with someone one-on-one to work through your traumas, to work through your fears and what you've gone through in your life. This is not a death sentence. This doesn't mean that you're crazy. This doesn't mean that you're off your rocker. This is just a support for some time. I feel like mental health services should not be something that you need lifelong. I think that it's good to use it for certain points in your life where you need someone to be there for you and to provide you with that warm hug.
For someone who I guess maybe is struggling or needing mental health services, there's a lot of different ways to access different services. And some of the things you're talking about that are very preventative in nature, that are very supportive in nature, are very readily accessible in a lot of places for free. In fact, apps are available, different types of recorded meditations. There's a lot of things on YouTube. There's the resources you were speaking about that you have. I mean, I think there's a lot of ways to access it, but there's still a stigma to people actually going and grabbing the resource and using it and making it active. So can you give us some tips about how can we take these resources or information and put them into practice or into habit in our day-to-day lives?
Well, for me, it was starting with having more mental health workers of color. So they understand that we know where you're coming from. Some of us have been through your struggles and we can help you through that. So just seeing someone that looks like you. Have you ever been somewhere where everyone is different and you see that one Latino and you're like, hey, let's chat, right? You feel more comfortable. It's something like that. And I think people should start slow. If you don't feel comfortable with a mental health worker, start with an app or start with just meditation and just finding yourself, finding what you need, getting to know yourself, because I think that's really difficult for a lot of people. Learning what your traumas are, what you've been through, what's holding you back from being the person that you want to be. You may not even know that, but if you start journaling, or if you start just taking some time to breathe, because that's where we start with meditation, taking some time to breathe, eventually you might reach that step. Or just working on yourself, you might reach those goals. Sometimes you don't need a therapist.
And books, I find books very cathartic and helpful as well. And I know you remember the time when I decided to pick up and move to Africa because, that's just how I do things. And
Super brave. You're super brave.
For listeners who don't know, I just happened to in grad school just pick up and move to the village in Uganda with no power and no water for 6
That's
months.
amazing. That's really amazing.
To do a needs assessment and just kind of hang out. Best learning experience in my life. But I also took a few books with me, acquired some books along the way, was journaling, and I hadn't discovered meditation yet, but I remember falling into these like depths of despair level because of the cultural shock. And when you said, have you remember seeing a Latino? Oh no, I was the only white person for like 20 miles. So when I saw another like quote unquote white person, I was like very excited. It's like, oh my God, I found you. And people knew where I was because I was the only quote unquote white person for 20 miles. So it was just a really odd experience. And I remember that time, just the rapid amount of growth in your 20s, but still not having all these tools down yet. Like I still needed another 20 years to discover Reiki, to discover meditation, to discover like other self-help techniques. And I think you kind of had a similar journey, right? Like in your 20s, we didn't know about these things. I don't know. Did you?
It's absolutely not. I
Okay.
think social media and like YouTube has really helped us share information that wasn't available when we were growing up. I think it was like 2002 when the internet first really started going, and we really didn't have this readily available. These days, you pick up your phone and you have 50 encyclopedias worth of information on anything that you're looking for. So I think it's a different day and age, and the younger generations have such an advantage in that essence because they can just use their phone and get anything they want. So I think that's why it took us so long. If I had this available, forget it. When I was in my 20s.
Yeah, well, then I had to drive 20 miles to the internet and do a dial-up situation. So I was never going to get it, even if it was there. But now,
but then when we went on, there was like nothing to find. Like no one had an internet.
No, there was barely websites.
No
back in that day. We're aging ourselves. But I think it's great because we've seen the growth of the internet, the power of information, the power of freedom of information, and how that really does help with equity and level the playing field, especially for people of color. And now you can talk to my friends in Africa that I was there with, we Facebook message now because they're like on their iPhones, just like messaging me. So,
and you still connect with those people and you still talk to them.
That's still connect. Still years later. Yeah, absolutely. So I want to shift a little bit in the last couple of minutes. We have a little bit left to this interview, but I want to focus on you as your business owner, as the entrepreneur woman that you are, and in the space of, continuing your elite journey. How did you decide, okay, I'm going to stop just focusing on my 9-to-5 and my normal day-to-day, family obligations and other things you have going on. And I'm really going to put some effort behind this blog and make it something. Like, how did you make that switch? And what was it like for you to transition yourself from employee over to boss?
Well, for me, I'm doing both. I'm still straddling both. So I work with children. I've worked with children from ages 4 to my oldest student, about 26. So I've worked with the gamut of students, but I wanted to reach more. I wanted to focus on what made me happy and how I could give back to the community. I think the most important thing is giving back. And this was the way in which I found that I could give back. And being a business owner, you're saying it, I'm like, yeah, really, I am a business owner, because sometimes you forget. But it's a tough transition. It's like, okay, I gotta set this. No one's telling me what to do. I have to organize this. I have to align this. I have to figure this out, because we've come from we're used to, since we're children, someone tells us what to do in school. Someone tells us what to do at work. So now when you have to figure out your days and your times and your hours, it takes a lot of discipline to do that. So that has been somewhat of a struggle for me. But I am the kind of person where I love learning new things. So I'll sit in front of a computer and build my own website, which is what I did. And now there's like different kind of structures for building your website, which makes it a lot easier. But I did the work and I sat there and I struggled and I went through it in order to have the website that I have now.
Man, you just said something really clutch for I think a lot of people that I coach, which was I struggled through understanding the website because I think the forcing yourself to get your website going and to be clear about your services and what goes on your website and what it's doing and how it brings people in, even if it's just a quote unquote blog that's monetized and that's your business, it still has to have a structure that brings in traffic that you understand. And you may not build it yourself, but you can't like buy a website from a company and leave it on the shelf and then expect it to bring you business. Like that is not how it works.
Right, exactly. I learned the language. I learned a bit of how to size things, how to maybe looking back at
No,
it.
are you coding in CSS?
Yes, I learned a little bit of that because my background is in networks and computers many moons ago. So it was a little bit easier for me. But now that I look back at it, I'm like, that took a lot of my time. There's always an easier way. But I'm thankful for the struggle because the struggle led me to where I am today and what I had to go through.
It's funny how when you do learn those things, it unlocks a little bit more, but you also are like, maybe I just want to pay people to do this now. And I know to be able to tell them to make this thing this way, right? Like,
Right. You have some control. You know what it takes.
Yes. And I have the specifications and the words that match their expertise so we can speak the same language. And that's something that I always have to sort of translate for some of my clients. And they're like, I didn't learn this language. And I'm like, that's okay. That's okay. That's what we do here.
Exactly. Exactly.
The other question I had for you, because I know you mentioned like your holistic wellness kind of journey that you've been on. What other wellness techniques do you use in order to balance the two responsibilities that you kind of have, plus your personal life, right? So the regular job that you were just mentioning, serving kiddos, and then this idea of bringing wellness information to women and inspiring change in that way. And then also all the other applications that you have.
Right. So I'm working a 9 to 5. I have 2 beautiful daughters. I have an amazing husband. So I have to try and balance. The hardest, most difficult thing is understanding the many gifts that you have and understanding what are you giving up. So I think balance is so important. If I do this, what is it going to take away from here? So I try to make sure that I give my husband time, my children time. Obviously, I have to do my regular 9 to 5, but also this outlet that I have that brings me so much joy because it does bring me joy to help others. It does bring me joy when I conduct a live and people are watching it and they're appreciating it. So that's also part of me. That's part of my self-care, understanding that this is what I need to be a whole woman. That's how I see it. Easy? No. Doable? Yes.
But like people say, oh, I can't find balance, or it's hard for me to find the alignment with all these things in my life. But I think, like you said, it is about your priorities and how you choose to spend your time. And all those things are all equally important, right? So you can't like be like, oh, priority number one, like not my kid.
Right.
You know?
Right. Forget parent teacher night. I'm gonna go and work on this blog. No, we have
and I'm gonna take a bath after.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I need me time.
Yeah.
So it's difficult, but it's doable. I mean, it's so doable.
I love that. And as a mom, I know you're thinking about inspiring the next generation. So I wanted to ask you this question in particular. What challenges have you had that have kind of made you redefine success for yourself? And how did you kind of overcome them or get past them? Thinking about, what might inspire someone who's coming up and listening to your answer or listening to this interview.
Ooh, you threw a tough one at me there, Wendy. You don't have to do all the things. You don't have to be everything to feel whole. And I think that's something that's taken me a long time to figure out. You don't have to be the best at everything to feel fulfilled. You have to be good at some things and you have to be happy with yourself and the decisions that you make. I mean, it's hard sometimes, but I mean, you can't be everything to everyone. you just have to do what you can because you will burn yourself out. We've all been there. I've been there. It's impossible what society feels that we can do these days. We have to be these super women. We have to be the best cooks, the best moms, the best wives. We have to work our 9 to 5s, make sure that's done. And then also, if you're interested in something else, you have to be amazing at that too. Setbacks are a learning process and not a direction that you're not good enough, not an indication that you're not good enough, you're not a good person. Take every defeat as a learning process.
Ooh, I love that. You have such a great message. It's like the people obviously understand why I asked you to be on this interview. I think that that's really important, though, because we do try to show up in too many places and then end up showing up nowhere confidently, right? And it does become a limitation or a barrier for ourselves and our own success because we're constantly trying to do too many things at once. And I know I've had to, do things like time blocking or doing a time audit to see where I'm spending my time. I think there's a lot of different tools and resources you can use to be able to understand how to better utilize your time. But I'm just curious, since you are obviously superhuman and doing all these things, obviously, if you had some extra time just in your week to do something for your own well-being that you love, like what would that be? Like what would be your preferred activity to unwind?
Let's see. Okay, this is a little bit cliche, but I know there's women out here like me that like to do this. Okay, sometimes I just like to go to Home Goods and walk through the aisles and just look at all the stuff. And just like, okay, how can I make my house look cute? Let me go down the aisles. Let me go shopping. Things to beautify my home make me really happy. I also like to go out. So that's my, like, when I want to spend or do those kind of things. There's a lot of women out there. I know you're out there. You like going down the aisles of Home Goods. The other thing that I like to do is I like to ground myself. So I like to go outside. I'm fortunate enough to have a backyard. I like to go outside without shoes and feel the energy of the earth. I was just working in my backyard yesterday. It was a beautiful day out and just hugging a tree. First, you ask a tree for permission. You ask the tree for permission. Can I come over? Can I share in your energy? Then you hug a tree or you sit next to a tree, or if you're not wearing any shoes, just connecting with that tree and you stay there. And for a few minutes, you can close your eyes, you can meditate, but you feel the energy of that tree and that aligns your energy. And after a few minutes, you feel amazing. That's the simple thing that I like to do to ground myself and reconnect with my higher self.
Oh man, that's such a great technique for grounding. I've never thought about just asking and then hugging the tree. I've
Yes.
probably
And then you thank the tree afterwards. You thank them.
I've sat in a hammock in the tree. I mean, that's probably as close as I've gotten to that practice, but I
You want
appreciate
to connect. You want to
Yeah.
connect, Wendy. And I think it's amazing. Give it a try and you're going to feel, for me, I feel like a vibration. So that's just the energy of the earth. And it's medicinal for the body.
Yeah. And if anybody has been to like a very dense jungle in your life or a place that has like overgrowth that's very old, you get that sense of like just a completely different vibe and it's amazing.
Yeah. And just to add an aside, in my town, we have a 500-year-old tree. So I did a meditation with this 500-year-old tree and the energy was astounding. Imagine 500 years, what has happened in 500 years. So that was just something that was phenomenal. So it costs nothing. It's a beautiful day at the park and you just go and ground yourself.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you said the park, and I instantly had flashbacks to Central Park. It was
No,
the other day.
no.
I know. I thought of how many times I fell asleep in Central Park. I don't know how that never like ended up on a CSI sort of situation. I was always in that park sleeping.
The relaxing energy of it all, right? The
Yeah,
energy,
it's so
the
nice.
calmness. You can't find that everywhere.
Especially on a warm day in the city and everything else is sort of congested if you go to the park and the trees and the grass, and it was just amazing.
But you get it when you've been doing it without realizing.
Oh, yeah. Probably like a lot less intention, but I don't do it as often as I should, but I do ground and I do like to be outdoors. I'm an outdoorsy girl.
When you feel really stressed out and out of sorts, I would say go ground.
Oh yeah. And also just go out into the fresh air and breathe.
Yes, take a walk.
So amazing. So, and this final question for you is really about where people can find you to connect and what might they want to connect for. So give us a little bit of information about, obviously you mentioned elitelikeyou.com, but what else might people want to connect with you for?
If you want to do one-on-one meditations, I'm available for those on elitelikeyou.com. Also, I have about 20 different meditations on all different topics. One of my favorites is connecting with your child self. So your inner child, connecting with your inner child. So you can find that on Unified TV. So that's Unified TV, UNIFYD. And I have all my meditations there.
I love it. I love it. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation with a really amazing friend. So excited for having you here. And thank you everyone for listening. This has been another episode of the Social Impact Level Up podcast. Thank you for being here. Thanks for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and we look forward to having you come back. If you are curious about something we shared, make sure that you check down in the show notes below. And if you're ready to grow your revenue, I have a little gift for you. Download my Revenue for Impact guidebook at wendyveloz.com/guide. See you next episode.